So Marv, what's the best part about books?
Oh, the smell.
The smell?
Yeah, like when you open a fresh book and gust the pages in your face and just sort of like take a big whiff.
Your face.
Yes, your face. You don't do that?
Marv, I only make friends with people who do that.
Me too. Hello and welcome back to Notorious for Mumbling with Neff
Hello.
and Marv. Hi. For the 7th chapter titled Neff and Marv Climb Ladders at the Library of our 8-chapter story, we are talking about many people's basic assumptions of a story, the book. We'll talk about the professional side of printing, which is my current immersion,
Yes, it is.
our favorite literature and genres, and why books are considered the norm in Western society.
And as always, listener discretion and caution is advised for controversial and unpopular opinions, language, potentially offensive content, and free thought. So, Marie,
Yes.
you're in a print immersion, right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I don't call it print immersion, but
What do you call it?
I
Besides its given name.
just say I'm into bookbinding and letterpress.
Okay.
Define print immersion. Explain it for those who don't know it.
So for me, print immersion, it's an immersive course, so it's putting you in it.
Oh
It's actually
yeah,
making
you're
you
right.
do
It is immersive.
And
It's called an immersive learning course. So like yes,
And
True.
it's about print and printing,
but also bookbinding.
of course. But I think to me that's a general assumption when it comes to old
Book-
style printing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Well, kind of.
kind of.
Yeah, because So I am currently in it's not even an organization. I feel weird calling it an organization
It's a
because I
course,
get
but
credit for it.
yeah.
It's a class. It's also an internship. It's also
Mhm.
a job. It's also all of the things that you think it could be.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Book Arts Collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a community-based sort of. It's kind of hard to explain because it is something that is for students, but it's also for like the community. So it is a maker's space is the best way I could describe it. And
That
so
is a good way to
it's a
describe
collaborative
it.
space.
Yeah.
Haha, Book Arts Collaborative. So it's for letterpress printing and for bookbinding. And then we also publish an author's book
Mm-hmm.
in second semester of our year. And we also hold a Ways Goose, which is a fun printing term that people use to describe kind of like the celebration of the end of a season. So it is a term that was like developed by print people who owned the print shops would have people working in the print shops, and then once their print season ended, they would hold a party. And they just called it a Ways Goose. I think it's because they used to cook a goose or something. I don't know.
That's
It was explained to
disgusting.
me once. I don't remember why, but we hold one every spring called Interrobang,
Mm-hmm.
which is, if you don't know, Interrobang is the symbol of a question mark and an exclamation point together.
Yes.
Book Arts Collaborative is really, really cool because the whole point is to preserving and sort of like showcasing and I guess promoting the like skills of letterpress printing, which most of you probably know based on Gutenberg. He's a really cool guy. And bookbinding through the community.
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, so it's kind of really hard to explain beyond like, oh, we make books and we do letterpress printing. And those two things do go hand in hand. We do print a lot of things for our books. We can print covers. We can print little decorative things on the pages. But most of the time what we print is like posters, coasters, envelopes, cards, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though we do a lot of decorative printing for our books. So like when you go to a store and you find a beautiful journal and you open it and there's a little quote inside, you know? We do that, but we do it all by hand. So what the difference is that like most present day, the way books are made is just through a factory.
Mm-hmm.
It's why you can buy a journal for so cheap. Like a moleskin journal, people are always like, oh, like $15 for this journal. That's because it was factory made.
Right.
And like that's not that expensive when you compare it to like handmade journals. So what I do is I start with like big sheets of paper and I fold and I rip them down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I fold them again to give you the nice little what we call signature or the gathering. And then I punch holes. And then I stitch them together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to glue them. And then I have to take this hard board called Davy board and then I have to find pretty paper that I like. And I have to cut down the paper, and I have to cover the Davy board, and then I have to make a spine, and I have to do it with linen, and then I have to glue it all together to make a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I make it all by hand. And so the things that you're buying from Book Arts were made by hand from the students in Book Arts Collaborative. And additionally, we teach workshops for the community where people can come and they can learn how to make a book or print a poster or a holiday card. So that's kind of what Book Arts is in general. It's just a collaborative space for people to teach other people the art of bookbinding and letterpress printing, because it is really, really cool and it makes you appreciate the physical object.
And that is actually what we're here to talk about, is that physical object of the book.
Yeah.
Everybody has a favorite one.
You're welcome for that setup.
A favorite food, show, song, artist, child, and book. But us, we won't lie to you about our intentions. We have favorites, both stories and books. So I'm going to list off some of my favorites, starting with a story, and that's The Yellow Wallpaper. It's a common one that you read actually in high school.
You read it, I'm pretty sure I've read it in like almost all of my English classes ever.
Yeah, and I really like it just because of the mental state of the main character. I like the way that's messed with. Next is another classic high school book, which is Great Gatsby.
I love talking about The Great Gatsby. Yeah. Here's the thing. One, it's a book that I think everybody has read, and if you haven't read it, it feels almost weird that you haven't read it. Like, my boyfriend hadn't read The Great Gatsby, and I was like, did you go to public school?
So, I mean, it's generally speaking, I love F. Scott Fitzgerald. He is tied for like my favorite author with Poe, but that's a given if you know me. More books that are my favorites, and I'm just going to talk about two different sets. One are Michael J. Fox autobiographies, and autobiographies are mostly celebrity writing about themselves. And I absolutely love autobiographies.
Yeah, they have a special place in your heart. I learned that very quickly about you.
Yes. I don't know what it is about them that draws me into it. I think it's just the fact that not only I'm still learning about someone, like someone else, so it's still a form of history, but I'm also, in a sense, experiencing and understanding myself through their story. And that's something that I hope that this podcast is doing with you guys as well. Another one is Here's the Deal, Don't Touch Me by Howie Mandel, another autobiography. And that's one of my favorites because he is OCD, and the background behind most likely why was pretty insane. And if you don't know, I'm not going to spoil it for you, even though it's available on the web, but look it up. It's fun. Not fun, it's tragic and terrifying, but it is very interesting nevertheless. And I Wrote This For You, and I Wrote This For You and Only You, this is the sequel, by Ines Thomas, incorporates photography and poetry. And those are two things I have high interest in. And lastly is going back to Poe. I have a lot of Poe favorites, but The Fall of the House of Usher is very good.
It's a classic.
It is a classic. As for genres, I historically prefer autobiographies and poetry. One seems to be the most boring and make me feel more at peace with who I am, as others tend to have gone through similar experiences. That allows me to connect the author in turn to my readers with my own work. And I think that's a very important aspect to signify. And then poetry is fun to me. I got into poetry late. Only my senior year of high school is when I really dove into it. Let me form myself without being too literal.
Yeah.
When Marv met me, I was pretty deep and fast into poetry. And I was told by her and others in the past that I used to speak in riddle. And I would say for some parts I still do.
Oh my God.
It's awful because it confuses people.
Okay, wait. We need to pause because this is a very important story to tell. One time, Noah, well, you were giving me something. I don't remember. It was a piece of paper. Something was on this. I don't remember what it was.
Are you talking about the whiteboard one?
Yes.
Yeah, I got you.
And you were like, "Oh, Marie, I'll leave it in the journalism studio for you. I'll leave it in DY's room, and you just have to get it." And I said, "Okay." At the end of the day, because I'm in there like 6th and 7th period.
Right.
And I walk in, and DY's like, "Hey, Noah has left you this riddle on the board to find this thing that he wants, like you were supposed to get from him." And I kid you not, I spent both class periods trying to solve this freaking riddle, and I couldn't. I was so mad at him. And you almost let me like go home not having figured it out.
Yeah.
But then I was like,
the biggest thing is that you knew, like you knew it was in
a dictionary.
But you just didn't know what page.
No.
And you said you flipped to it and you didn't find
I
it.
did.
But then I'm like, okay, you lied because it's obviously one of the pages.
I did flip through it. It's fine. It's fine. Whatever.
But with that, I gave her riddles, and we exchanged riddles back and forth for a little bit. But it's a good memory, and I cherish it as I leap into where I landed today. And I have more favorites, and I'd be crazy not to. But we only have so much time. So Marv, what are some of your favorites? I'm totally prepared for a scroll to be like whipped out and just hear the sound effect of, you know,
It
might
will
be a mile long or so.
Yeah. Ha ha ha, Noah. Funny jokes. I do have a lot of favorites. Reading was really important to me growing up. It really helped me figure out who I was as a person. It's still something I love to do. I can read a book in an afternoon if I really wanted to. My favorite classic book is Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. Both of them by Lewis Carroll are really great. I really enjoy how simple they are, but also they're kind of dark and challenging and weird, and I just really like the narrative. And I think it's totally okay to like things just to like them. I don't think everything needs to be so like critical and analytical, and I like it because of the sometimes I just like it. Okay. A book that I recently read in a class, actually, that I really enjoyed was Maker of Saints by Thulani Davis. I would say that very quickly became really high priority on my list. It's a very interesting look into African American societies right after the Black Arts Movement is when it takes place, about this like African American woman whose best friend is dead, and she doesn't know if she's committed suicide or she's been murdered by her white boyfriend. And it's just like a very interesting look into race and art and relationship and understanding like identity, and it made me cry, and it was so good. I would highly recommend that. My favorite collection of poetry is Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. That's a good one. I have liked Walt Whitman for a long time for a lot of different reasons. He's a great author. He's a great writer. He is really smart, and he has a really smart way of saying things and a really smart way of like portraying images like grass. But also, if you read Leaves of Grass, the whole thing, it's like about Song of Myself has like 3 different images, but it also just looks at like the concept of identity and like who you are as a person. My favorite book series ever, not Harry Potter, as most people would say, like, oh, my favorite book series. My favorite book series is a series by Maggie Stiefvater, and they're called The Raven Cycle. I freaking love The Raven Cycle. They're so good. They're so good. So it follows a group of kids searching for a dead Welsh king, but there's concepts of ley lines and energy and angry teenagers and not being able to kiss your true love, and it's so good. And I feel like when I talk about books that I love, I can't tell you why I love them, because it's just like, I don't know, I just love them. So I think I'll really enjoy The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater because of her characters, which is something we talked about in a few other episodes. But she just has a really great way of developing characters, and she has a really great narrative voice, and I really appreciate that. Let's see. I really enjoy romance books. I really enjoy YA contemporary books. So Anna and the French Kiss. Well, I reread that book a lot, and that book makes me cry. One of my favorite short story writers is Raymond Carver. He writes great short stories. I really appreciate how to the point he is in writing, which is it's a voice that I have never been able to master. Yeah, lastly, I think it is important to note that I don't know if I would call myself a John Green fan. I feel like I'm pretty critical of his books. I have read all of his books except Turtles All the Way Down. I am not a fan of The Fault in Our Stars. Sorry?
Controversy.
Yeah. I did read Looking for Alaska. I read the end essay for like a project once, but his book Paper Towns is one I can get behind, to say the least. I read Paper Towns at a really like important time in my life, and I would argue that it's his best work because it's very, I don't know if this is a word, but oxymoronical, in the sense that it kind of is what it tells you shouldn't be. The book itself is that, and there's a lot of like oomph there that means something. And I have reread it so many times. The front of my book is peeling. Like, yeah, it's wild. But to throw some quick titles your way of like books that I also like, Six of Crows series is really good. Would highly recommend those. I really like Pride and Prejudice. That's a classic. Frankenstein is good. Classics like 1984, Scarlet Letter always feels good. Did I already say Frankenstein? Yeah, I did. All the Light We Cannot See is really good. That was one that not recently came out, but it was really good. The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is a really, really great book. All the Bright Places. All the Right Places is really good. I, too, am a big fan of Fitzgerald. I like The Great Gatsby. I really like Ernest Hemingway. I like him a lot.
Two totally different authors.
I know. But I feel like if you bring up a book, there's a good chance that I've probably read it. I've read a lot of books. But I just feel like I read because I have to. Not, well, I want to. But also I feel like I have to because it's like a part of me. Yeah. I really like the Percy Jackson books. I read those growing up. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe is so sweet. That's a really good book. Oh, I did read Love, Simon at some point. That was good. Yeah, I think this kind of goes into like genres, but I think I really enjoy young adult books. I know I enjoy young adult books because one, they get shit on a lot for not being like a good genre, which I don't think is true. But I also really like the drama of them. And I explain, people like, I don't read it because I like to be, well, I am a dramatic person, but I don't read them because I am a dramatic person. I read them because there's something really comforting about knowing that to this one person, like all they have is this moment. And it's just so fun to see people experiencing like high schoolers, like young adults. Like they only know so much about the world, and it's so much so as like what their high school experience is. I feel like adult books are very interesting because they have a whole worldview of like, I was young once and now this is my perception of the world, and like I can reflect on that. Involved. Yeah, and in with like teenagers and young adults, like all they have is right now. So like the fact that so and so didn't take them to the prom is a big deal. And you just gotta respect teenagers for feeling the way they feel all the time and not feeling like guilty about it. I read fantasy books. I'll pretty much read anything, like Six of Crows and like The Raven Cycle, books like that. They have their magical realism. And I really enjoyed that. I really like playing with that. I really do enjoy fantasy. Fantasy novels are fun because you get to build everything new. I enjoy like YA contemporary novels. I enjoy novels about falling in love because who doesn't want to fall in love? I really, really enjoy short stories. I think short stories are a really fun thing to play with because I am really bad at writing short stories because I can't ever end them. I know why like The Raven Cycle or Leaves of Grass or Paper Towns are my favorite books. But I really just think that it's important to just like have books. Like people who say they don't read, I don't really understand. They're important to talk about, and they're important to reference, and they're important to discuss. Just to like finish off favorite lists, I really like I'll Give You the Sun. That's the last one, just some last recommendations. The Foxhole Court series is really good. We Were Liars. That book will fuck you up. And then Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which I have actually on my shelf over there. Yeah, I just think you should read in like the most polite sense.
And just as you have favorite stories, we do too. And it is normal to have a story that you place on a pedestal. But the key to storytelling, especially about printed material, is to discover why you do, like Marv and I just did. Now, Marv, since you might know a little bit more about the history of print, why do you believe books are the norm, like the Western norm, the American norm of storytelling?
One, economically, after the printing press, knowledge became so widespread that the consumption of reading material really increased because everybody wanted to be able to experience it now. It was print media was so elite before the printing press because everything had to be done by hand that only a select few people could read, and those were the people who could afford to pay a scribe or afford the media because they were expensive because people were writing them by hand. But now that you could mass print things, everybody could read. And so all of the stories got printed. Like no one could do, plays were happening and like theater performances were happening, but that was different because it was viewed as like a form of art. And like the first books that were made were not, they weren't fiction books, or they were books about like instructional manuals. And eventually people started printing stories. They would print small stories in like a newspaper and print small stories. But I think that because books can be accessed by anybody, that is why they stick as like the foundation of storytelling. Even in your like city's library, anybody can go in and anybody can read a book in there. They don't even have to check it out. They can read a book in there and they can put it back on the shelf and they can walk out. You can't do that with the movies that they make you rent from the library.
No.
You can't do it with anything except the book. And anybody can go in there. I can go in there. Noah can go in there.
Yes, I
The
can.
president shouldn't.
Probably won't.
No. Our last president can go in there.
Ready to build his own.
Somebody who is homeless or doesn't have an access to an education can go in there. And they can read something. And they can, if they don't know how to read, they can start with like a basic level of reading and they can move. Like, it's a form of storytelling that is always available to everyone all the time. All the time. And I think that's why it's still a foundation of the current expectations of storytelling, because it is the most basic function of storytelling. The first was orally, and the second one was written, because the concept of writing a story down is universal, and it's something that we go back to because it's something that we want to remember.
That's okay. So like, I expected to like build off of something you said, but you put it so well together.
Thank you.
Yeah, like honestly, I have nothing else to say because I agree with everything you said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't anticipating like nothing being left out, but nothing was left out.
Listen, I really love books.
So, books, literature, and print can provide willing inspectors of storytelling, rich reasoning behind their own likes and dislikes. This extension can be utilized to their own stories. They do say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and if you know what you're drawn to, chances are that others feel the same. And we know we do too.
I'm very interested in this, Noah, as we head to the end of our podcast episode. What song of this chapter will be in relationship to books?
Yes. So I always try and connect it somehow to the theme of the chapter. So for chapter 7, I think I've chosen a good one. I promise. So drum roll it. Okay. Don't tap the table. Perfect. And the song is Dream Away by Babyface and Lisa Stansfield. Now, you may not know the song title. It's definitely not something that anyone just pick up. But the reason why it was chosen is because it is a featured song in the film The Page Master with Macaulay Culkin. If you have not seen that movie, I grew up on that movie. It is a hoot. But when I was thinking of the title of this chapter, Climb Ladders in the Library, I was thinking of the scene in the film. So it automatically made me want to go to it.
Yeah, people should watch the movie.
They should.
I know this was a lot coming at you, and I know I talked about it a lot. So if you would like to continue a conversation with me personally about books, I would be more than jazzed to, because we can talk about a range of topics like censorship and like why young adult like literature is real literature and all that stuff. And or if you just want to talk about how some of your favorite literature can create a story for you personally, you can follow us on social media at NJ Sandel or at Inky Squares, or you can email us. For Noah, he probably wants hate mail.
I do. It's like a small indicator of notoriety.
Oh, and for me, like, just be kind because I cry a lot. Either way, keep listening to Notorious for Mumbling on YouTube or our websites. And the next episode is our final chapter. It's a really big one, and it kind of relates to like all of these, but I think it's the most well-known type of story.
I agree.
And it will be over relationships and love. And it is titled, Neff and Marv Learn Their Love Language. That's it.
That's it.
Bye.